In my many discussions with atheists, I'm frequently challenged to prove that God exists. Sorry, no such luck for the atheists.
So if you can't show us that God exists, why should we suspect that he does? Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Now, I'm pretty sure that the person who uploaded this video isn't the person who made it, but regardless, get ready to see some of the most ridiculous, self-contradictory arguments for why atheists reject God, as if that's what we're doing. Oh, and telling people why they do something or what their motivation is?
Back to paddling.
Atheists just can't, or should I say won't, believe God exists. They can't find God because, first of all, they aren't looking, and second, they want to avoid him.
That's a paddling.
Now that's not even close to true. Most atheists are atheists because they did look for God and didn't find him. And why would I want to avoid something that I don't think is real? I mean, okay, as I understand it, most Christians are terrified of not living up to God's standards, of being judged and sent to hell, so I can only assume that this is projection, that you think atheists are running away from the thing you're scared of. I think a suitable analogy would be that, due to childhood trauma, I'm terrified of dogs. Now, if somebody else didn't want a dog as a pet, and I assumed it's because they're just as scared as I am, wouldn't that be a bit presumptuous? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that sure sounds like what you're doing with God and atheists.
If you don't believe me, do a test. Find an atheist chat room on the net and offer any evidence for God you can think of. Then sit back and count the milliseconds before the evidence is attacked.
And what makes you think that this is because atheists are avoiding God or don't want to find him? Is there no possibility that your evidence is just shitty? And this is what should happen for anything, not just God. All evidence, all arguments should be critically scrutinized before being accepted. What you call being attacked, I call logical reasoning.
And you'll notice that the longer you defend your evidence, the more fervent will be the attacks on it and inevitably on you.
Or, to put it another way, the more stubborn you are, the less willing people are to put up with your shit gracefully. If you're shown logical reasons and evidence why your arguments don't work, but you stick to your guns anyway, people are going to start to think you're a bit of an idiot, and they'll start to treat you accordingly, especially online.
Be prepared for some mockery and ridicule. You'll be told you're stupid, an idiot, and that you believe in mythology.
Do you consider Zeus, Ra, Odin, witchcraft, and magic to be mythology? Take a step back and look at how your religion would seem to someone whose world isn't fully invested. Can you see why it might sound like mythology to other people?
Unfortunately for the atheists, God isn't found under a microscope, in front of a telescope, behind an X-ray machine, or in a sock drawer.
Unfortunate for the atheist? I'd say that's unfortunate for you if you're going to try to convert people.
God doesn't bow to the arrogant whims of atheists who demand he show himself to satisfy their criteria.
Then your God's a bit of an arrogant prick. I mean, come on, what's the message here? Believe in something for which you'll never get any evidence, or else? Would you put up with that shit from anyone if it wasn't your God?
Atheists need to rethink their approach and shift their criteria to look for a person, not a thing.
Except that people are things. You call God a person, from which I assume that you're willing, rightfully so, to not confine the word person to humans. With that in mind, I challenge you to name for me one, just one personality that didn't come from a physical object. And no naming God, that's cheating. Take me, for example. Like me or hate me, I've clearly got a unique personality. And look, solid object. My personality comes from my head meats, my brain. And I've had a lot of kitties in my life, and they've all had distinct personalities. And hey, look, solid object. It even works with artificial people. You ever play The Sims? They have unique, distinct personalities, and they're generated by a computer. Look, an old-school Tamagotchi. And a Furby. They kind of had personalities, and clearly they're physical objects. With all of these examples, I hope that the general trend is clear. Personalities, people, are things, and there is no shame attached to that fact. The only examples ever given for people who are not physical objects are ghosts and gods, and given that we never get any evidence for them, can you see why claims of their existence might be just a little bit difficult to accept?
They should realize that attacking someone doesn't encourage a relationship. In fact, it's common sense that when you attack someone, mock his character, dare him to do what you want, and insult his person, He will withdraw from you.
Withdraw from me? But when was he ever drawn to me? I've never seen him. I have no reason to suspect he exists. That's why I keep daring him to do what I want him to do, namely show the heck up. And mock his character. Have you ever actually read this book? There's shit God pulls in here that you would never put up with from a human. So why should God get away with it? Of course I'm gonna mock him for being a jerk.
God, the same as any person, is not in the habit of answering the patronizing challenges of the proud.
Patronizing? Proud? Explain to me exactly how it's patronizing or prideful to say, gee, let me know you're real. That's a bit like saying, no, don't check to make sure that charity is legitimate and really helping starving kids. Just send money. I ask again, name somebody, anybody you'd take this crap from besides your God. And if the answer is nobody, then why is God the exception?
Yet atheists treat God as though he were some kind of thing, some object to be judged, some celestial phenomena to be measured in their lab.
You claim that he exists. Why should we accept that claim if you can't prove it? Why should we even suspect that it has a scrap of validity without some evidence we can check for ourselves? If I told you there's a purple-spotted snorkel whacker living in my closet, would you accept that claim sight unseen? So why should I accept that your God is real?
Sorry, atheists. Doesn't work that way.
Sorry, God-botherers, you've failed the burden of proof.
I mean, how can any atheist ever expect to find God with such demanding attitudes?
I don't see how anybody could expect to find God without one.
They don't want to find him, so they construct excuses and ridiculous expectations to keep themselves secure in their anti-God delusion.
You know what happens when you tell people why they do something instead of letting them tell you.
That's a peddling.
At this point, I'm reminded of doubting Thomas. He didn't believe Jesus rose from the dead. He wanted something better than rumor. He wanted cold, hard facts.
And good for him.
Now, you'd think that Jesus would refuse Thomas' request, but amazingly, Jesus provided what Thomas asked for.
Wait, so the guy who doubted asked for cold, hard facts and got them. So Jesus, or God by proxy, is willing to fulfill this doubting Thomas's fellow's request for evidence, but atheists are patronizing and proud to ask for the same? Your argument lacks consistency, sir.
Now, depending on Thomas's presuppositions, he could interpret the evidence in different ways.
Yes, he could. Or he could keep an open mind, take the evidence on board, and withhold a final conclusion until there was more corroborative data.
Maybe it was just a simple, elaborate hoax, and that Jesus hadn't really died but was plotting with the Jews to overthrow Roman oppression.
Maybe. But given that it was the Romans who allegedly beat the shit out of him and then nailed him to a tree, I think it might be a little unlikely. I think a more likely conclusion is that none of this happened at all and this book is fiction.
Perhaps he was looking at the hitherto unknown twin brother of Jesus.
You'd think those alleged three wise men would have noticed another bundle of joy in that manger and, gossiped about it a little bit over a couple of beers at the local pub. If there was going to be some sort of Jesus-swapping impersonation hoax, far more likely that Joseph and Mary bumped uglies after the virgin birth, and Jesus had himself a little brother who looked an awful lot like him with some chin pubes on.
On the other hand, maybe the man standing before him was really a holographic projection from the future.
Dude, that would be cool! Except that you said that Tommy Boy got to fondle the Savior's perforations, so probably not a hologram.
Or it could have been that Thomas was suffering from post-traumatic crucifixion of my Savior disorder.
Okay, now you're just being silly.
Laugh a while you can, monkey boy.
Why did Jesus appear and grant Thomas his request?
Yes, why? Yes, why? Oh, please tell us why.
Maybe it was because Jesus simply chose to, or it could be that his testimony was needed to verify for others that Jesus had risen.
You mean how we atheists, the others in this particular scenario, need verification that God is real?
So why did Thomas believe? Was it because there was sufficient evidence on which to make a logical decision of faith? That sounds reasonable. After all, Thomas saw Jesus right there in front of him. He saw the holes in his hands and the wound in his side. You think that'd be enough?
Even if it wasn't enough, it'd certainly be a step in the right direction. And by right direction, I don't mean proving that God does exist, but rather coming to a logical and well-reasoned conclusion based on facts, whether that conclusion is that God does or doesn't exist.
Notice that Jesus said something very interesting after showing Thomas the facts. Actually, it was a command. Jesus said, "Be not unbelieving, but believing." verse 27. Jesus commanded that Thomas believe after he saw the facts. Thomas obeyed and believed. Now, what would an atheist have done?
Well, I can't speak for other atheists, because you know what the punishment is for saying what other people would think or do.
Oh, you better believe that's a peddling.
But for myself, I would say, that's kind of interesting. Unexpected even. There may be a little bit more to this God thing than I first thought, and it warrants further investigation.
You see, it appears Thomas needed a little help.
But don't you see, that's what atheists are doing. When we ask for evidence, when we ask for God to show up, we're asking for a little help. Exactly the same way you say that this doubting Thomas fellow was asking for help to believe. But when we ask for evidence, when we ask for that same kind of help, do you empathize? Do you try to understand why it's so important to us? No, you call us patronizing and prideful, and then wonder why we're not so polite to you afterward. And why the heck is belief so important anyway? If you and your God really wanted us on your side, wouldn't something like loyalty be more important than blind faith? Wouldn't it be better to have said, I've read your doctrine, God, and I agree with it. Let's be allies. But when the demand is belief without evidence, can you try to understand why my suspicions might be just a little bit aroused? I'm not rejecting God. I'm rejecting faith. Of course, I might still reject your God, because a lot of what's in here is just horrendous, but that's a separate issue entirely. The point is, it'd be awfully nice if religious people would revise their idea of who atheists are and why we're not religious, because the truth is that their preconceptions are nowhere close to the reality. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.